Many years ago, when I was just starting out in parish ministry, I was feeling very confident. I thought I had a good seminary preparation for this new venture, and was feeling quite confident except in one major area of my life, and that was personal finance. I had learned nothing. We did not have economics in high school. I don't know what the story is now. I didn't know about compounded interest. I didn't know anything. And I thought, how am I supposed to stay financially solvent on what at that time was a rather meager salary, and then maybe even someday when I get really old, retire. And I decided to do something about it. So I hooked up with this national financial advisory group. It was founded by a man who had written several bestsellers just on this topic for people like me who knew next to nothing but wanted to get away from living paycheck to paycheck and to having some kind of nest egg that they could rely on in the future. And this whole program was geared around a number of strategies, tons of strategies, but there were very practical steps that one could take to replace unhelpful financial actions with actions that would help produce wealth. And I remember specifically one of the strategies in particular jumped out at me just because of the title. It said, use the 10% solution to go from paycheck to prosperity. And then I read it. And you can know that it made such an impression on me because I cut it out and put it in a file. I've had it all these decades later. I can share it verbatim with you. It said 90% of the families in America are still living paycheck to paycheck, always finding too much month left over at the end of the money. Paycheck to paycheck is a symptom not of a lack of income, but of a lack of skills needed to build wealth. You begin to feel as if there is no level of income you cannot outspend. I thought, I know that. Here comes the strategy. Beginning with your next paycheck, take 10% right off the top and send it to a mutual fund family. Do the same with every paycheck you receive for the rest of your life. Write yourself the first check each month before you pay the rent, the mortgage, the car payment, or buy the groceries. Always pay yourself first. The less money you think you have, the more important the strategy. Make the 10% solution a personal challenge. Do it now. Don't wait for it to happen. I was dumbfounded. I mean, here this major financial institution had unapologetically taken one of the most ancient biblical concepts and simply replaced the word God with myself. And they didn't even give a nod of the head to Moses for thinking of it, because the law of Moses, remember, required the Israelites to set aside 10% of the first fruits. That's off the top. That's the cream of the crop. That's before they paid the rent or the mortgage or the chariot payments or whatever they were. They set that 10% aside for the work of God. And all of a sudden, I'm supposed to put my name there. Pay myself first. And I was equally bemused by all the letters they would publish from people, thanking them for introducing them to the 10% solution. I thought, where have these people been? They certainly haven't been in church. They would say things like they found it challenging and exciting, but liberating, and it had changed their whole financial self-image. Thank you letter after thank you letter. And it got me to thinking that maybe I should encourage parishioners who tithe. And I do hope we all know the difference of the phrase tithe and pledge. I hear lots of times those words used interchangeably, and they're completely different. Pledging is what we will do at the end of this service when we make an estimate of giving to a parish for the upcoming year. A tithe is a very specific kind of pledge. It says, I will give 10% of my annual income. So that's rather significant. It is a pledge, but it's a special pledge. And I thought maybe, and we have people here in St. John's that tithe. I thought maybe I should encourage them to write letters of thank you to Moses for introducing the 10% solution and challenging them and making them excited and feeling liberated with a whole new spiritual understanding of possessions. So I'm being a little snarky, and I guess I have to also confess to you because of that I, in fact, not only did I keep the 10% solution in my file, I have used it ever since the late 80s, and it has transformed my ability to think that I can, in my dotage, live a comfortable life. But I never saw it as the first fruits. It was the second fruits. My first check was to the work of God in my local parish, and then I looked for my nest egg. I have been blessed, I will say. I've been able to live off of 80% of my income my entire life. Not everybody can do that. But it has richly blessed me in that. So what's all this 10% solution stuff have to do with what we're doing today, Consecration Sunday, and specifically the scripture reading? Because in no way do I stand up here and tell any of you that you should be tithing. That's none of my business. It's a conversation between you and God and the people that rely on your income. But for anybody that thinks it's rather outlandish to even consider giving away 10% of one's income, I'm afraid to say that our scripture readings this morning are not going to help in that regard. Because they're both our reading from 1 Kings and our gospel reading are stories about two very poor widows who give away not 10%, but all that they have. All. That first reading has Elijah asking the poor widow in Zarephath for a meal. And so she's not really a cheerful giver, is she? She sort of begrudgingly says, oh, sure. My child and I were about to cook up the last meal we have before we die because of this drought. And I said she obviously wasn't from Portland. But we'll give it to you, and then we'll die anyway. And Elijah says, no, don't be afraid. If you're willing to let go, God will see that your provisions last to the end of this famine. And so they did. And then that famous gospel reading from Mark that we call the story of the widow's mite. That's M-I-T-E, not M-I-G-H-T. I heard somebody say you have to be careful about the widows because they just might. The small bit, the widow's mite. We hear that Jesus is standing in the treasury, watching people put in their gifts, which seems sort of an interesting action in itself. But he sees all these people putting things in, the widow put in 2 copper coins, which we're told equals a penny. And he says to his disciples, this woman has put in more than any of the others, which of course we know literally is not true. But he says because everyone else has given out of their abundance, and she out of her poverty has put in everything she had, all that she had to live on. That's quite a sobering story here as I potentially wrestle with the idea of letting go of 10%. I mean, it seems to me she could have held on at least to one of the coins and she'd still be giving away half of everything she had. Doesn't seem like she even considered the 10% solution. She just gave it all away. And here comes my second confession. Ever since I was little, I've known Jesus really admired her. That's why he told that story. But I have always thought that she was rather irresponsible. Because as a kid, I remember thinking, I think I even said to my mom or dad, well, if she gave away everything, wouldn't that mean somebody's going to have to take care of her? And she's going to impose on them to take care of her? And then I think of all the modern day widows across our country who send in what little they have to fund some televangelists so that they can live their extravagant lifestyle. Now I know the point of the story was not irresponsible giving. Jesus lived in a religious culture where the rich wanted people to know how much they gave to God. And Jesus says, the amount you give has no meaning at all. The only thing that has any meaning is the amount you give in relation to the amount you have. And that, of course, immediately reminds me of these horror stories that you hear about, oftentimes it's like Southern Baptist parishes, I think, where they post the amounts of the pledges of their parishioners. You know, this happens down in the South, some places. And no matter what you think about that kind of transparency in giving, I've always held it's meaningless. It tells you nothing to know what somebody gave. The only thing that would be meaningful is to post the percentage of their annual income that each person gave. But do not worry. The Episcopal Church has some things we will never, ever do. I promise you that. I promise you that. Let me say, for a preacher to talk about Christian stewardship is always a challenge, because it's very hard for them not to sound like they're saying, you need to give, and here's how much. And even if they wanted to say that, it's not very helpful, is it? It's no more helpful than me saying, you ought to come to church, and here's how much. Or, you ought to pray, and here's how much. No. The only thing that I can say with integrity is coming to church, daily prayer, have both brought me great joy and spiritual growth. And I commend it to anyone who wants a closer walk with God. And in terms of our topic today, the only thing I can say to you is yearly pledging to my parish church has brought me great joy and spiritual growth. And I commend it to you, to anyone who wants a closer walk with God. Now, over the many weeks, several weeks leading up to today, including this morning, and thank you, Pat and Tom, we've heard our parishioners speak very eloquently about the reasons they give. And one recurring theme has been how people at one point in their lives gave out of a sense of guilt and sort of obligation. And many people talked about how they moved on from that, which I love to hear, because that in itself is a sign of spiritual growth, isn't it? Because I want to tell you, in no way do I give to the work of God in this place out of guilt or out of some onerous obligation. Oh, I just got to do it. And I hope that none of you would give for that reason. I give to this work here out of a deep sense of gratitude for all that God has given me, and for the joy of seeing what my widow's mite can do in the lives of countless others. You know, when I see a parish create a safe environment for children where they are taught that they are loved by God, I give thanks. When I see strangers welcomed in the community of faith as fellow seekers and disciples, I give thanks. When I participate in the church-giving blessings where others have hurled curses, I give thanks. When I see the sick visited and the poor empowered and the different included, I give thanks. And when I witness your faith, your prayers, your forgiveness, I give thanks. So in the midst of such boundless blessing, whatever I decide to write on that pledge card has nothing to do with should or ought, and everything to do with joy and thanksgiving for being a member of the people of God.